What would you say is the most important skill for someone to have when pursuing a career in journalism?
I would definitely say curiosity is number one on the list. Because, I mean, if you're interested
Mhm.
in something, then it's much easier to kind of help make sense of it.
What makes a story newsworthy in the science world?
It's a balance of understanding what is newsworthy for you, like what is exciting for you, what would be exciting for general readership, and then publications have different things that they're looking for.
Welcome back to the EssayPro podcast. My name is Kennedy, and the podcast title for today is How to Break into Science Journalism. And today we are met with Sofia Quaglia. It's Italian. Why don't you tell
Perfect. Thank you.
everyone here? Yeah, tell everyone here what you do in this crazy world.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kennedy, and great pronunciation. You did really well on that. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having me on today. I'm really glad that we get to kind of chat. I'm here today to kind of talk about journalism and journalism that specifically covers science because
Mhm.
I'm a freelance science journalist. So basically, I am a freelancer, which means I don't work for any one specific publication. I work for several different ones on hire. I'm a journalist, which means that my job is to report and interview people and do research and then write it up for the general public. And I cover
Mhm.
science, and I mainly cover science, biodiversity, the environment crisis, climate change, and kind of everything that kind of sits under that big science umbrella. So excited to chat about all of that today.
Yeah, that's a pretty massive umbrella. Um, what would you say kind of inspired you to get into journalism, especially about science? And how did you know eventually that this was the right path for you? And would you describe
hmm
science journalism as a good career, I guess? I mean, obviously for you it
hmm
is, but how would you describe that?
Yeah, of course. Loads of
Kind of two
questions
questions.
wrapped in there.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, so I always knew I wanted to be a journalist. I'm one of those really lucky people who was just kind of really young and already saying, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna be a journalist." I don't really remember. I don't have a crystallizing moment when I think like, "Oh, that was it." It was just kind of always something that I wanted to do. So that's what I trained for right out of high school. I went to university for journalism and then I got a master's degree in journalism. But I kind of just thought I was gonna be um, a general reporter. So I started off, I wanted to be a war reporter, then I wanted to be a crime reporter, then I wanted to be just a daily news reporter. So I knew I wanted to be a journalist. I wasn't necessarily set on anything specific. Um, my first years, I did travel journalism, I did music journalism. I reported on labor violations in New York City for a year. So I was reporting on a wide variety of things, but my real first job was for a publication that had a big science section. And so I was writing about science for them for a general audience still, but it was kind of like quirky, cool science, everything from like particle physics to tech stuff to more medical stuff and some
Mhm.
biodiversity stuff as well. So I kind of fell into the science reporting.
Mhm.
Obviously, the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis are some of the biggest crises of our time. And so it is a huge beat that a lot of reporters fall into just because the coverage of a publication happens to end up covering this a lot. So it would have
Mhm.
been a natural progression for many other reporters, probably. Um, in the field of people who call themselves science journalists, I'd say it's like a 50-50 split. People who were science first and then became journalists to cover the science they were passionate about, and people who were journalism first and then covered science as a beat, we say in the journalism world.
Mhm.
So I kind of fell into it, but I love it. There is science in everything. Everyone's always like, oh, but how are you doing it without having a science background? You don't actually need a science background to cover scientific discoveries because at the end of the day,
Mhm.
your loyalty is to the reader and you're speaking to a general public. So you need to make sure that they understand it. And so if they need to understand it, even if you're not a scientist, then you can do a good job of explaining it to them because if you understand it, then they
Yeah.
understand it. So I kind of fell into the science reporting, but I love it. It's a huge, huge, wide-spanning beat. I started off doing general stuff, so all the sciences from physics to medicine, as I was saying earlier, but now I'm hyper specialized in kind of environmental stuff, the biodiversity crisis, Specifically, I write loads about small, ugly, disgusting creatures that people find gross, like ants and bees and worms, and why they are actually really, really important for how the world functions and the equilibriums of the universe, and also why they bear the brunt of the biodiversity crisis really hard. Um,
Hmm.
this was kind of a long-winded answer about how
No,
I
it's
ended up
great.
doing science journalism. I do in the field, there's um, a lot of arguments about whether you're a science communicator or whether you're a science journalist and what is the difference. Not everybody agrees. Personally, I like to say that I am a journalist who covers science because if
Mhm.
tomorrow my boss called me and said, Sophia, you're moving to Washington, D.C. to cover the Trump administration, then I would do that because I'm a reporter first and foremost. So I would move on to a different beat. There are other people who don't feel this way and would only ever want to report about science. But that's why I say I'm a
Mhm.
journalist who covers science. And
Yeah.
sometimes shorthand is science journalist.
Yeah, yeah. So very versatile. So would you say you're kind of like the middleman between science and like the consumer? Like you kind of break it down in a more digestible way? Because I know there's a lot of big words in science. Yeah.
Yeah, a hundred
Okay.
percent. That is what our job is as science journalists. Our job is to most of my day is spent speaking to scientists, reading research papers, trying to make sense of some of the really complicated but important stuff that research labs are doing all over the world, and then translating it in kind of more of a simple, approachable, kind of important things first approach for the general
Hmm.
readers. I write for both publications that are more science focused, like Magazine or New Scientist. So those
Hmm.
readers already have a little bit of an interest in science. But my preferred publications to work for are actually publications that speak to people who might not necessarily care about science in the first place. They're reading the paper and they stumble upon a science story. So these are the national publications like BBC, Guardian, New York Times. I like writing for them because we're reaching a readership that doesn't necessarily have an initial interest in science
Hmm.
for sure. So that's kind of what our
Cool.
job is. Our job, though, I will also say, is often holding science to account. Because
Hmm.
science is brilliant, it's fantastic, but there's a lot of issues with how some science is done. There is bias. There are people who aren't well intentioned. There's a lot of uh, problematics that we need to be critical about when we report on science. So my job isn't just explaining the science to people, but also putting it into context, helping people critically analyze it, thinking about like what's good and what's bad, and calling
Hmm.
out when people screw stuff up, when there's bias in research, when there is somebody who is investing some funds in research because they have ulterior motive. So our job as
Hmm.
journalists isn't just to translate the science, but to make sure that we're bringing readers all of the context and all of the background to make informed decisions about their life.
Wonderful. That's great. That's very, very good answer. Um, for students who are kind of interested in journalism and especially in covering science topics, but aren't sure if this is the career that is right for them, what advice would you give them to help them get started?
This is a really difficult question because obviously journalism is an evolving world. Science is an evolving world. The situation right now for the market for journalism isn't fantastic. So there are a lot of things to take into consideration. Um, my first, my most, yeah, I think my primary advice would be just to read a lot of journalism because that's when you understand kind of what science journalism is. I know oftentimes I speak with my friends and people who are like interested in my life and my job, and we talk about what journalism is. And in that conversation, I end up changing people's minds about what it is that I'm actually doing in my job. So my biggest advice would be to kind of just really familiarize yourself with the field and read loads of journalism and be interested in kind of what the coolest stories of the year were or what the cool science of the year was and is because that really helps you make up your
Hmm.
mind also if this is something that you actually want to go into and what
Hmm.
that looks like and kind of what the criticisms are and where you can improve the field and where you see yourself in the field as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, is that valid advice? Would you say that's helpful?
100,000%. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned kind of just being interested in learning more things, but what would you say is the most important skill for someone to have when pursuing a career in journalism? And then scientific journalism specifically. Like, is it like
Mhm.
curiosity or is it something else or what would you say?
I would definitely say curiosity is number one on the list. Because, I mean, if you're interested
Mhm.
in something, then it's much easier to kind of help make sense of it.
Mhm.
Um, Attention to detail is a really, really important skill, which I kind of suck at. So I'm still really trying to improve my attention to detail. But
Yeah.
that's a very, very important kind of journalistic skill that I think is often overlooked because people think that my job is just kind of writing and writing my thoughts and being good at writing. But in
Mhm.
reality, it's a lot more about being attentive to the details of the science that people communicate to you or of the differences. Like, so that something is factually correct, you need to make sure that everything is precise. So I'm still really like trying my best to improve that skill. So
Mhm.
curiosity, attention to detail, um, kind of yeah, understanding what a story is, but that's something that we work on all the time. So like why does this matter? So yeah, so let's say that's critical thinking. So why does that matter? And what could be the downfalls of this? Or why could it be good? Kind of trying to understand broader context and holding several truths at the same time and understanding kind of like, both of these things can be true. This is good, this is bad, and I'm telling you this story. So yeah, I'd say curiosity, critical thinking, and attention to detail. But it's not a problem if you don't have the attention to detail or if you have any of these skills, to be honest. All these skills are skills
Yeah.
you can work on and improve. My
Mhm.
attention to detail still sucks, and we're out here trying to improve every day.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Paying attention to the little things, of course. Um, you mentioned that there wasn't this big aha moment that started your career, but can you share a moment early in your career where you realized like, wow, this is it. Like I'm really doing this thing. Like you were like, you're in the mix, you know? Like what moment kind of made you realize that you did
hmm It's a very difficult question. I feel like I should probably
it?
have the answer for this, but I don't necessarily know if I do. I
Mm,
definitely think the biggest satisfaction or the biggest moment where you're like, damn, I'm doing this right now is when you're reporting out in the field. So
mm,
obviously the portrayal of journalists we see in TV is always like them going out, investigating, speaking to people, holding microphones up to politicians. Obviously, that happens a lot. But
uh-huh.
a lot of journalism is also kind of just sitting at your desk, reading stuff, people not returning your phone calls, trying to schedule meetings with somebody who is in Antarctica and can only speak at this specific time, which happens to be 3 a.m. for you. So there's a
Right.
lot of kind of desk work as well. And so the real cool part of realizing like, oh, wow, I'm doing this. This is journalism. This is happening is when you are out in the field and you are embedding with
Mhm,
communities. And in my specific case, I write a lot about the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis, right? So going out and speaking to the people who are actually affected by this, spending time with them, spending time with their families, doing the groundwork, understanding, getting a sense of what that actually feels like. Um,
mhm.
I think those are the moments where I'm like with my little recorder and my little badge, and I'm saying like, oh, this is what I'm doing this for, right? This is what journalism is for. Being in the field, speaking to the people, sharing their thoughts, ideas, voices, and showing people their lives. Rather than like, obviously, I love to interview scientists and speak to scientists, and this is like it's so you're so overwhelmed by knowledge when you speak to somebody who has studied something their whole life. But then it's
Mhm.
also really great to then go on the other side and see the people who are affected by this and see the people who are actually coming to terms with what the climate crisis looks like in their real world. So those are the moments, and they happen. They still happen. Like there isn't a moment where I'm like, oh, I made it. I am nowhere close to making it. But going out in the
Yeah.
field and being with sources, and the kindness and generosity with which sources let you into their life. Like, I've
Hmm.
been to barbecues with families. I've held people's children. I've gone to funerals and weddings. Like I've been embedded in these communities in ways that is insane to me that somebody would give me this access, trust somebody with a
Yeah.
story this much that they're like, yeah, come have a barbecue on Sunday with my family and we'll tell you how this employer screwed us over. So
Mhm.
yes, sorry, I'm going on because I'm super excited, but I
No.
think those are the moments where you realize this is what I'm doing journalism for. Um,
Hmm.
and those are,
You
yeah,
get to
that's
hold the
those are the
baby.
moments where it crystallizes.
Yeah, got the baby in your arms, like I made it. Let's go. That's cool.
I did I did a story
Dope.
about maternal mortality in New York, and then there were obviously like a lot
Oh.
of kids involved. So it was
Hmm.
really just lovely because you're reporting on something that is so horrible and heartbreaking and like just awful, and then you get to have the silver lining side of it, like the beautiful, like this baby is born now and we have this new life. So yeah, crazy. I'm like holding
Yeah.
people's newborn children.
And that's the situation where the mother dies during birth, right?
Yes, in this
Maternal
specific
mortality?
case, none of the
Okay.
none of the mothers died. These were about women who
Oh,
have managed to make it through the system because even though the system is
okay, good.
rigged, they're survivors. But yes, this is
Good.
maternal mortality is a really big issue still today.
Sophia, I had a question for you. How do you find scientific stories to cover, and what makes a story newsworthy in the science world with all the stories out that you could possibly cover? Can you describe some of them, like the best ones, and
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. I'll give you a quick rundown and then I'll give you some examples of stories I've worked on. As a
Okay.
journalist, I like to think I cover four different types of stories. Four, this is four, that was three. Four different types of stories. The first type of story is the news story. This is what I cover the most, and it is an example of like you're reading the paper and you see new frog discovered in the Amazon. This is a news story in
Hmm.
the scientific world. We find these types of stories by reading scientific papers, learning about scientific papers before they go out to the public during the embargo phase, which is a phase where the scientific paper is ready, it's almost ready to be published, but it's only shared with journalists so that we can kind of get a lay of the land, see what's happening, and evaluate them for the news. And in the third case, which is what I kind of tend to do most now, is cultivate a network of sources and scientists who you've worked with before, who trust you with their work and who are willing to call you up and tell you, "Hey, my story, I have a new scientific discovery. We're going to announce it in about 2 months. Would you be interested in learning more about this?" And kind of by cultivating the that network of sources, you have news and you know about scientific research before it comes out to the public. So that's the three ways that you usually find news stories. And the ways that you evaluate, so cultivating a a sense of what is newsworthy is something that journalists work on their whole lives. It's a balance of understanding what is newsworthy for you, like what is exciting for you, what would be exciting for general readership, and then publications have different things that they're looking for. So, what my boss at the New York Times might like and think is newsworthy for their readers is not the same thing that what my boss at The Guardian would like and think that is newsworthy for their readers. So, there's a lot of
Hmm.
different boxes that you need to tick depending on who you're writing for. In most cases, the one thing you really, really want to look out for is why does this matter? Does this have bigger implications? So in the case of new frog discovered in the Amazon, it's never just new frog discovered in Brazil. It's always like the smallest ever frog discovered, or a new type
Mm.
of poisonous frog, which we didn't know existed. This type of poison is super rare. Or in the case of, for
Hmm.
example, telling the story of Amazon frogs, which I cover quite a lot, is mainly because the Amazon is at so much risk, deforestation, the habitat is being destroyed, the climate is right, the weather is changing, the climate is changing, the temperatures going up. So whenever we're talking about new discoveries, for instance, we put them in the lens of this new species was discovered, but it is already endangered. We didn't even know it existed, and already we've almost driven it to extinction. So that's the bigger picture, right? So it's not just this small frog or this very poisonous frog or this weird frog that does this weird thing with its toes, but it's also the context, right? This new
Mm-hmm.
frog, which we didn't know existed, but suddenly it's already on the brink of extinction because we are destroying its habitat. And so that's what
Mm-hmm.
you're usually looking for to understand whether you want to report on a news story for a science news story for the general public or for the public at large. So that's kind of what you're looking for. The other three types of stories that we work on are enterprise stories, explainer stories, or feature stories. Enterprise stories are kind of just like news stories, but they try to put together a variety of different studies. So let's say I see a trend. There was a time when I was reporting on, let's say, the frogs again. And I see a trend where over the course of 3 months, there are 9 papers on this new species of tiny, tiny frog being discovered. And so the enterprise story there would be, look, there's a trend. People are discovering all these tiny frogs. What does this mean about the state of frogs, the state of tiny animals, the state of biodiversity? So, kind of looking at a lot of news and looking at the little bigger picture a little bit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Explainer stories are usually found because we listen to what readers want to know more about. So my editors will assign me stories that they know readers have been searching for. So they do analyses of what are people searching for on Google? Is there a new movie out that talks about genetic engineering? And are there questions about genetic engineering that we should be answering to make sure that readers are informed about the topic when they go to watch this movie? So explainers are usually born from either the news cycle, the conversations that are going on in society right now, or actual hard data that teams in newsrooms are collecting, checking who's Googling what is the most Googled question this week, what do they want to know, and kind of assigning that story out. And then the fourth type
Mm-hmm.
of story is the feature story, which is what most journalists want to be doing all the time. It's the longer stories, the stories where you go out in the field and embed with the community and speak to people who are involved in topics and in the story itself. And those stories are almost always born from kind of when you're not researching, when you're not reading the papers, when you're not like deep into the mechanics of stuff, but you learn about an issue that somebody is having, or you read a footnote in a scientific paper that says, the indigenous community that was in charge of, or that was for years taking care of these frogs has been decimated by XYZ issue. And so that's why the frogs are endangered. And so that's not a
Mm-hmm.
news story, but maybe it's another angle. You can go and spend time with this community, interview people there, understand their point of view, and look at the story of biodiversity from their eyes. And so that's kind of a feature story and how that would be born. So, yes,
Mm-hmm.
those are the 4 types of stories, the 4 types of places where you go looking for the stories or how they are born. And it's almost always a situation of understanding what are the implications? Like, what is the bigger picture here? Why does this matter for somebody who is reading the news on the subway today?
Mm-hmm.
Either because we've made some mess that nature is having to pay the price for, or because new science that we have could fix a problem that we have created or that we've come across. So there almost always is a bigger implication. It's just a matter of finding it, and that's the one thing all editors. You wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, "What's the story? What's the story? Why does it matter?" Because what's the story is the question all the time. It's not just we discovered this new frog. What's the story here? Why does this frog matter? That's kind of the thought process behind the scenes.
Okay. No, that's a lot of good info right there. Like kind of finding the hook and juicing it out and getting all the facts and evidence. That's good. I like that. Sophia, what would you say within your line of work, what are some common challenges that you face and how do you overcome them?
Mm, that's really good. So
Mm.
this is, I'm going to take this question from like a side angle outside the box.
Right.
No. I think obviously there are a lot of really small, specific, everyday challenges, including kind of the fact checking process, the attention to detail, making sure that something is correct, actual, factual, accurate. Like all these things are the most challenging part of journalism because obviously we want to get stuff right. But the bigger picture challenge I think that we're facing a lot is how do we get scientists to trust the media? And how do we get readers to trust the media about science, right? Because media makes a lot of mistakes. Journalists get stuff wrong. Journalists have bias in how they report on stuff. And so this is a big picture issue that we face as a community, as a slice of the workforce, as a society. So like, how do we trust science more? How do we get people to trust what we're telling them about science? How do we communicate science accurately? What are the repercussions to that? But then in my everyday life, it's also kind of like, how do I get the scientists to trust me with their work? You know, this is somebody who's spent what, 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, even maybe just 2 years, but they've spent much of their career working on this topic, working on this discovery. This has been their bread and butter for so much. Like, why it's hard for them to trust a journalist to then take that and explain it to a bunch of random people, right? So there is, what if they get it wrong? What if we misunderstand each other? And so that's the challenge that I try to overcome every day of kind of like A, getting scientists to trust you, B, walking them through the process. So this is the what I like to do is when I got on a phone call with a scientist and I'm going to report on their work, I want to try to explain to them all of the little bits and pieces, like what's going to happen, what my goals are, why I'm asking these questions, who the readers I'm speaking to are, and why it might change a little bit of the tone of the conversation. What my boss expects from me, what my readers expect from me, what the process looks like, how I'm going to check this, how I'm going to corroborate this, how I'm going to quote them. So
Hmm.
actually, I do a lot of work in schools and unis as well of talking to scientists and being like, this is what our side of the process looks like. Tell me what your side of the process looks like. And let's see how we can both be on the same side, trying to communicate accurate, factual science in a way that's exciting and inspiring and interesting. So, yes,
Hmm.
this is what I would say is kind of both a big, big challenge because I'm not going to be sorting it out soon, anytime soon, overnight. But then a small, small challenge in our everyday conversations with scientists and sources. You know, like how do you build trust
Yeah.
with the researchers who you're speaking to, and how do you explain to them why sometimes headlines are misleading, or why
Hmm.
sometimes something is simplified in a specific way. Um, Obviously, we're not doing this maliciously. Um, so explaining the process of like what my boss expects from me, what my readers expect from me, what I'm trying to get out of this phone call is also just kind of really helpful on a human angle, right? Like you're talking to another human who's sharing their life's work with you.
Hmm.
This is my take.
Okay, so it's like trust and collaboration can be uh the challenges. That's kind of like because I work in film as well, and that's kind of I feel like a big challenge is trusting people and like trusting people with like, with their vision or what they've worked on. You know what I mean? And collaboration can sometimes be a tricky thing, but yeah, I totally get that. Um, so how important do you think it is to stay updated with the latest trends in journalism and news about science? I assume it's probably very important, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's really, really important. I do say I suffer from being very overwhelmed very often, though, because the internet is huge, science is
Mhm.
gigantic, the media is ever changing. So, can you really ever be up to date with everything?
Not
Um,
everything. Yeah.
Having a good media diet, I think, is important. This is a conversation I have with my parents a lot, kind of older generation who has been used to relying on a single form of media, and kind of now is having to learn to branch out to different types of media and getting their news and information from there. So
Mhm.
obviously it's a challenge. It's an ever-changing thing. I don't know. Obviously, it's very important to stay up to date with stuff. It can be very fatigue inducing. It can be very overwhelming. I often have weeks when like I'm pitching stories and I'm like, "Ooh, there's just so much stuff.
Mhm.
How do I find what matters? How do I know what's important? How do I, you know, parse out what matters?" So yeah, it's important, but it's hard. So don't be too hard on yourself if you're not like acing it all the time. Like there are a lot
Mhm.
of things I don't know anything about, and that's also fine. Like you're not supposed to know everything all the time.
No, if you did, your head would probably explode. Just got to sort through it all and get what resonates, I guess, huh? That's good. Sophia, do you have any tips for getting your first writing gig or internship in science journalism? And what was your first one, or any type of journalism?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
The so I started I think my first ever internship was like 10 years ago now. So the field has changed quite quickly already.
Hmm.
Tips wise, what I would say is if you want to work, know why you want to work for a publication. So read that publication, read the news they cover, read what's important to them, get to know their work, and just be very frank about that. That's the most important part, I think, when you're trying to get hired for an internship or trying to get hired for a job, showing them that, like, I actually read your stuff and I understand your tone and I want to be a part of this specifically, not just be a part of anything, right?
Hmm.
I think that's something that I hadn't really thought. It was always like I was always applying thinking about me. Like I'm so great because this, I'm so great because that. You should give me this internship because this. Um, but it's a lot. Yeah, it's helpful to kind of think about the framework of like, what are they doing? What do I like about what they're doing? How could I
Hmm.
improve it, or what could I kind of help out with?
Yeah.
Why would I want to go work for them? So
Hmm.
reading the publication that you want to work for is always super helpful. And not being particularly scared of all the formalities of like cover letters and emails and like the editor and the boss. Just showing
Hmm.
people that you've like been interested in that publication or would be a
Hmm.
good fit or are interested in the stuff they cover, have read their work. That is more than enough, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
another thing, have stories up your sleeve. So there is oh, obviously there are a lot of skills that make a good journalist, but the number one first and foremost skill is finding stories and finding good stories. So always, whether you're going for an interview, maybe this is less for internships and more on in a more senior position, but I always go to interviews with story ideas, with pitches. Like I'm ready to hit the ground running. You didn't do a very good job covering this one topic. I found this other story that fits into this one topic, and I think would be a great addition to your coverage. Boom. You're showing
Hmm.
them, you read their work, you're showing them you do the reading, you know the stuff, you've been looking for stories. So those are my
Hmm.
two top tips for trying to get um try to face interviews and like internship applications and stuff.
Yeah.
Um
Good tips. Very good
my
tips.
first internship was a disaster, guys, which is gonna be
Why?
my third tip. So
Okay.
my Yeah, so I've screwed up a lot of things. A lot of things. I've
Okay.
had, not necessarily because I was doing something wrong, but because, you need to just kind of get your footing. My first internship, I was 18, just moved to London to study journalism, got a gig writing about music for a music magazine. Awesome gig. I was like, great. I get to go to concerts every night, and then I'd stay up all night, write the story so that I could file before everybody walked into the office the next morning and we could publish.
Hmm.
So the thrill of the journalism plus the perks of going, meeting people, interviewing singers, like it was great. I
Yeah.
sucked at it, apparently, or at least my boss liked to believe that I sucked at it, and I got fired almost immediately because they were like, yeah,
Wow.
the five, six stories that you wrote didn't really like them. Sorry, bye. Which
No.
for 18-year-old me was awful.
Uh-huh.
For them, work ethics wise is awful. Like, why would you, like, obviously, like, you have a new kid on the block, like, you want to teach them, you want to show them the ropes, you want to help them improve. But clearly, they didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the bandwidth or budget to do that, so they just got rid of me.
Oh
That to
no.
say, I'm sure I was miserable at the time and it felt like the end of the world. Like, oh, my first journalism gig, I got fired. How horrible. Um, the world didn't end. Guess what? It didn't end.
Yeah.
I'm
You're
here
still
10 years
alive.
later. Things are totally fine. So this is going to be my next tip. My next tip is like, even if stuff goes wrong, it's not going to be the end of the world. You might not get along with an editor. You might screw up a story and not do a really good job on that one specific story. It
Mm-hmm.
is not true that as a journalist, you are only as good as your last piece of work. As a journalist, you are good because of the outlook that you have on the world, the pace and the posture with which you try to do your job. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I got fired first. I wrote like 5 articles and they were like, yeah, this sucks. Your writing sucks. And it's true. Writing
Damn.
is not my forte. And I have a very specific musical taste, which clearly wasn't doing me justice or wasn't doing well
Wait,
in
wait,
my opinion.
who was it? Who was the concerts you went to? Like, what kind of music was it?
I'm so I went to like a bunch of different so I'd go to like both like concerts in a pub of like new up and coming. I also went
Mm-hmm.
to the Casey Musgraves Royal Albert
Oh,
Hall show.
the heck?
I didn't even know who
Yeah.
she was. This was like,
Uh-huh.
but it was huge. She had sold out the Royal Albert Hall. It was massive. I clearly didn't have the skills to cover that concert, which is fine.
Too much
Um,
lights.
so much going on.
Too many
But so
people.
I covered a wide array of stuff. And whatever. Like my writing is still improving every day
Mm-hmm.
since, 10 years later, we're still working on our writing. And that wasn't the end of my journalism career.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, don't give up, I guess. Or just
Okay.
like
That's great
don't
advice.
don't worry if things don't go the way that you planned immediately, that you're not getting this like big gig at the New York Times, or that you're not
Mm-hmm.
like in this like big splashy place, or that you kind of
Yeah.
suck at the beginning. Journalism matters intrinsically, and you can get better at doing it. But what
Mm-hmm.
matters is the stories you tell, the people you speak to, the communities whose voices you share. And so, meanwhile, you'll hone your skills. You'll get better at this. You'll
Okay.
improve. I got a
Yeah.
job offer rescinded on Christmas Day, and this was much
No.
later as well. Like,
Damn.
again, I thought it was going to be the end of the world. There wasn't any specific reason why they rescinded the job offer. Actually, it's because I wanted a non-compete in my contract. And they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to give me a non-compete in my contract. And
What's a
they were,
non-compete?
so a non-compete is when if you're working for one publication, you only work for them. You can't sell
Mm.
your stories to other people. Obviously,
Yeah.
this makes sense from a journalism perspective, but it was a trade publication where I was going to be writing about something that was very specific. So it was a
Mm-hmm.
very specific topic. And so I wanted to be able to write about other topics that weren't from this trade publication or weren't stuff that I would have worked on with them, for
Mm-hmm.
other publications. And that didn't work out for me. They rescinded my job offer. Again, not great work etiquette. There's a lot of bad HR out there.
Mm-hmm.
And but still, again, we persevere. Here we are. So
Yeah.
um, this was this is when I give talks in schools or at unis, I like to have like a final slide about all the times that I messed something up, or they fired me, or they rescinded a job offer. Um, to just like the flops are good to know about because everything looks so
Mm-hmm.
splashy. Like, oh, I work for Nat Geo and New York Times, and I'm like out in Chile in the desert chasing down cactus smugglers. Like, obviously, this is
Nice.
amazing and this is cool and this is fantastic and this is such meaningful work. It has involved a lot of L's. Like, I've taken a lot of L's, and
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. Like, it's not the end of the
Oh,
world. This is my main advice.
good. Okay. That's great. Kind of like speaking to what you said about covering that giant Casey Musgroves concert. How do you balance explaining complex topics in a way that is both accurate and easy to understand for a wide audience? And you could even get specific about like scientific topics or any topics.
Yeah. This is the ever changing, like ever persisting struggle. Um,
Hmm.
I think, yeah, I think hinging on to like, why does this matter always helps make
Hmm.
things more clear. So as long as you cover why this matters, then the rest of the stuff comes more easily. It's easier to distill into more palatable nuggets.
Hmm.
Um, but I will say, and this is a bit of a cop out, but again, it's just kind of collaboration. Collaboration with the sources you interview, being very vulnerable with them, being like, I have no idea what you're talking about right now. Can you explain this to me like I'm a 12-year-old, so that
Hmm.
I can get a better grasp on this? And so kind of communicating with the scientist and the interviewee about the topic and trying to break it down together in your interview, and then communicating with your boss and your editor and your copy editor in telling them like, no, this is a very important detail that I know matters because this conversation that I had, so we must keep it in here even if it's a little bit difficult to understand. And then the editor
Hmm.
says, no, but we will massage it in this way so that our reader understands it more clearly. So it's kind of a matter of
Hmm.
just like balancing with the other people that you're working with. And
Yeah.
kind of telling, not being worried about asking stupid questions. My job is literally asking stupid questions. I ask people to repeat themselves 100 times a day. And that helps kind of distill the concept, boiling it down to like, why does this matter? Why should I care? Why is this important? And then trying to communicate it like you're talking to a buddy, like you're having a conversation with a friend. So, like, why does this super specific thing about frogs matter to you sitting on the subway in New York? Let me
Hmm.
explain. And then taking it from there. But
Okay.
again, this is the challenge that we all have all the time, balancing
Yeah.
what is important for the science and what is important for the people, and striking a
Yeah.
balance there. But not being worried about trusting the other experts that you have, whether it's the scientific expert or the editorial expert, and working with them to reach that kind of end goal.
Always bridging the gap, you know, to
Loads of
get,
gaps to be bridged.
yeah, to bridge them things. That's great. Um, so Sophia, with social media being such a big part of our lives, obviously, how do you think platforms such as Twitter, X now, I guess, TikTok or Instagram play a role in journalism about science today?
This question's larger than life.
Oh, nice.
Basically, so I was not on social media for a long
Hmm.
time. I was not on social media as a content creator. I was on a social media to read other people's stuff. Um, but I now am on as a content creator.
Hmm.
I make short videos on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts about the science and journalism I cover. So basically about my stories. It I really did not want to do this. I was like, I'm bad at this. I hate this. I don't want to be on my phone. I don't think I'm going to be good at this. Like, don't want to do this. But then I slowly came to a little bit of a revelation that like me being on my moral high horse of not wanting to be on social media because what? Like because I thought I was better than everybody else was doing a disservice to my journalism because
Exactly.
that is where my audience is now. A lot of people consume their journalism through social media. And so
Hmm.
avoiding it was doing a disservice to my stories. And now I've
Hmm.
been making videos, and I like to think that even if I reach 5 people who wouldn't have read my story in print or in on online, if I reach 5 new readers or 5 new viewers in this case, then I am doing my job as a journalist of providing free, factual, important information to the public in an accessible way. And so I've shifted my perspective of it and started to see it as a continuation of my job as a journalist, a continuation of the life that I give to my stories. And
Hmm.
it's it makes like I get my friends who I know do not read my work. I know do had no clue what I actually did for a living, who now see my videos and they're like, "Oh, I get it. Oh, wow, this was so informative. Oh, wow, this was so interesting." Even though they would have never read the actual news. And so I
Yeah.
guess I'm doing my job, right? I'm sharing my news to a wider audience. Obviously, this is like why I've joined social media. Um, Obviously there's a bigger question of like disinformation, and if everybody can go on social media and post whatever they want, then how do we trust the news? How do we make
Mhm.
sense of what we consume online? Um, from a reader's perspective, that's obviously very scary and very important, and it's something that we need to train ourselves to be. We need to train ourselves to be media literate, consume information, cross check, reference it, cross check it. Um, Follow up on stuff, read more about stuff that we see on social media to check if it's true or if it's been exaggerated. Because obviously,
Mhm.
a little 1 minute video nugget is not going to give you the full story. So, following up as a reader,
Mhm.
I think, is really important. But then, as a content creator, or in this case, as a journalist, I wanted to join the discourse because I wanted to make sure that there was accurate, fun, interesting, factual information being put out there. And if many of us
Mhm.
continue to put out accurate, fun, factual information, then we can kind of help contribute to drowning out the misinformation and disinformation. It's quite naive of
Mhm.
a take for me, but I do see some reason to think it that way, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Do you think that's fair?
I think that's very fair. I mean, I kind of see it from a different lens because I work in film, and I know a lot of my actor friends. They're like, I don't want to be on social media, da 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 da. But getting on there is how you get your work out there, and it could be kind of overwhelming sometimes. But if you want to be seen and get your message out there, get on the Instagrams and the X's and all that stuff.
Follow me,
100%.
Kennedy. Follow me. Share my work.
I will. I will. We'll get that. We'll get that after this. We'll get that after this. We'll do the whole exchange. Um, okay. So, Sophia, um, what are some exciting developments or trends in science journalism that young aspiring journalists should watch out for? I know you mentioned the frogs. We love new frogs. But anything else?
Do you mean topic what like what are the big things that we're going to be covering more of? Or do you
Yeah.
mean
Or
changes
yeah.
in the media landscape?
Um, Maybe a little bit of both. Like exciting developments or trends. Like however you think you relate to this question. It could be both. A little bit
Mhm.
of both. Hmm.
So from a science, no, from a journalism perspective of the media
Yeah.
landscape, I think the next big thing is going to be writer-owned publications. And we see a
Mm.
lot of them springing up. So instead of big legacy media, kind of smaller publications that are owned by the journalists who are working on them, um,
Hmm.
and creating kind of interesting sub channels of readership on the internet in more intimate ways. I think that's going to be a big trend, or I think that's a trend we're already seeing. So there's Sequencer Mag, for example. I'm going to give them a shout out. Let me see
Hey,
if I can.
Secrets are
Um,
mad.
yeah, Sequencer Magazine. It's a writer-owned digital science publication.
Right.
I don't won't get into the economics of this because I don't know how it works, but they're not getting rich for that from this, right? They're doing this because they care about there being accurate, fun science journalism out there.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think we're going to be seeing more of this. I think this is a
Okay.
trend we're going to see in how the media landscape changes. So for people who are looking to get started in the industry, I used to be kind of against starting your own thing. But I
Yeah.
think maybe it's something interesting to look into, right? Maybe the
Mm.
economy right now calls for people to kind of start their own science publications and communicate on a smaller scale. Even if you work on stories
Yeah.
that matter to just one person, that story matters, period. Like it doesn't have to matter to millions of readers. or it doesn't have to reach millions of readers.
Yeah.
It can reach smaller quantities of readers and still do a really, really good job. So
Hmm.
that's what I think about the media landscape. And then things
Hmm.
to be excited about in science and keep an eye out for. I think the whole de-extinction conversation is huge right now, and we should all be
What is
thinking
that?
about that more. What? No,
The
Kennedy, we need to
extinction?
get you in on this.
What is
Um,
that?
so there's I won't name names, but there's some organization. There's one specific organization that is working to bring back animals from extinction,
No.
decoding their genome and then like making real life copies of them, of the woolly mammoth, of the
Oh
dodo,
man.
of the thylacine.
There's
Um,
like 10 movies explaining why this is a bad idea.
this is what a lot of people say, but then a lot of
It's crazy.
scientists think there's a lot of reason why this would work and why this would be important and why the science that we can develop from this could help do other things in conservation. So it's quite a big battle. There's a lot going on, and I think right now we're kind of on the cusp of like the next big thing in de-extinction. I'll share some stories with you
Mhm.
later after this call, but
Sweet
I
thing.
think that's a big thing in science to look out for, and to kind of
Yeah,
learn. It's just cool to learn about, I think.
100%. You mentioned like private publications like affecting like small groups of people. Have you heard of this thing called Substack? I kind of just heard about it recently.
Yeah,
That's
for
what do you
newsletters.
think about that? Do you have that? Do you have one of those?
No, so I pick and chose my battles, and my battle is going to
Mhm.
be social media for this year. So I just
Okay.
don't have the bandwidth to also start a newsletter. A lot of my colleagues,
Okay.
though, do have their newsletters, and they're doing very well. So that is exactly, I think that's exactly the kind of sentiment that I was getting at of cultivating smaller readerships that trust you and your work and are interested in kind of um, rather than big mass media takes on science, more thoughtful, nuanced, smaller, maybe kooky, kind of weird, thoughtful things about science.
Mhm.
So yeah, Substack is big, and I think will be a big trend in the upcoming months, years. I'm personally not on
Okay.
it. Who knows? Let's touch base in a year, not a month or two,
All
in
right,
a
I'll
year.
call you. I'll call
This
you and
year
ask
I'm
if you got one.
focusing on, yeah, yeah, exactly. This year I'm focusing on social media. Then maybe we will
Okay.
breach into newsletter territory.
Splendid. Wunderbar. All right, we'll look out for that. Um, okay, I got just one more for you. You ready? He's
I'm
ready.
ready.
Okay, good. Okay, Sophia. Finally, if someone is a student right now in 2025, what are some actionable steps they can take today to start building a career in science journalism?
I feel like I'm going to repeat myself, but read the journalism, read the science
All right.
journalism, read the
Okay.
stuff that you think is interesting. That is honestly all you need to do to start. And
Mhm.
practice writing, but more than practice writing, as in waxing poetic, practice distilling complicated stuff into more palatable nuggets. So,
Mm,
again, most people think that I'm just like at my desk writing these like beautiful, like thoughtful, frilly things. But in reality, most of the time I spend writing is like, how do I explain this in a way that is clear, concise, and accurate, right? So
mhm.
practicing the craft of making sense of things. Um, that's my primary advice, I think. Yeah, and just read stuff, be interested in stuff, be curious, find stories. If you find the stories, you're already a journalist. Finding the story is
Mhm.
80% of the journalism.
Okay. Being curious. I like that. I'm trying to be more curious in everyday life, like smelling things and like tasting random things. You know what I mean?
Be careful what you taste, but yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Curiosity, curiosity. Okay. Alrighty then. Well, all right, then that's about it. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for this great chat.
Of course. And for our listeners out there, don't forget to use code 20thread for 20% off your first order with EssayPro. Let's go, Sophia. Beautiful job. Thank you very much.